But hello everyone, my name is Ryan Lee, and today I will be talking to you about the EXT 3 and 4 file systems. So the EXT file systems, these are used for Linux operating systems. Primarily you'll find EXT4 nowadays. EXT3 is still prevalent, even EXT2. You're not going to find EXT1 most likely, but they're used for Linux operating systems, and they're the default file system for Linux operating systems. So EXT stands for the extended file system. There are 4 different generations, like I said. There's the original, there's the second, the third, and the fourth. The EXT original was developed in 1992. The architect was Remy Card, the main architect. He was inspired by the Unix file system, which is the UFS file systems. There definitely have some similarities, but he addressed some issues that he felt was in that file system, and he fixed them and created the EXT. However, EXT wasn't that successful, and they just soon replaced by EXT2 in 1990, it was about a year and a half later, and you really won't find anyone using EXT. But EXT2 could still be found on older systems and older operating systems, and then you can also find EXT3 and 4 primarily in use in many default systems right now, primarily EXT4, and some of the older ones from back in like 07, 08, some of the defaults are EXT3. And these operating systems such as like Ubuntu, Debian, and there's Fedora and Slackware here. So EXT3 is the third extended file system, and was released in November of 2001. So it was used to be the default for many. It used to be the default for many Linux distributors, and then the main additions from EXT2 to EXT3 is they added a journal. So the journal, it gives the ability to keep track of transactions while they're in the process of being committed. Whenever a change is being happened to some data, and if there's anything that goes array, such as the system fails or power gets shut off, it's able to, based off the journal, either revert those transactions if it has to, or if it has the ability to finish the transactions whenever the system is restored. And that just improves performance and reliability drastically. And so EXT3 also brought their file system online, and used online, and they also added they had large directories and large files. They decided that they're contiguous. Sorry, I can't speak right now. They created a data structure known as an H tree, which is just a form of a B tree to store these large directories and files in order to increase performance. And so moving on to the EXT4, EXT4 was the 4th extended file system. It was created in 2008. And so EXT4 made a drastic improvement on performance, reliability, and the capacity of the file systems. So this was always a complaint. The file says you can't store enough in a file. File name length is too short. So EXT4 addressed all of these concerns. And then improved performance by it changed fixed blocks of data, and it added the ability to create what's known as an extent, and it's an extent. It stores the starting and end points of storage essentially, and so now you can store long and contiguous files in and using only one inode header, so you can access all the files from their one inode header and via offset go to each one of the files. And so this improves performance drastically, and then they improved reliability by adding what's known as a journal checksum, which just ensures the validity of the journal. So this is the design, a basic design of a EXT partition, and so the basic unit of storage in many file systems is sectors, and so EXT data is comprised of blocks, which is comprised of sectors. So instead of clusters like we learned in class, we have what's known as data blocks, and the data blocks can be one or more sectors to store data. And so blocks are then organized themselves into what's known as block groups, And so the very beginning of a partition is going to be your boot sector. It's always going to be your boot sector, generally. And then you'll have your very first block group, and then you'll have block group 1, block group 2, all the way up to block group N, and then you'll just have all your unallocated sectors right there at the end. And whenever it needs a new block group, I'll make one. And so this is what each block group is comprised of. It's comprised of a super block, a group descriptor, the block bitmaps, the inode bitmaps, inode table, and then the data blocks themselves. So we'll just go by these one by one. So what's the super block? The super block is just kind of like the boot record for a group, and it contains all the necessary information about the file system. So that's like needed in order to properly use this, like the size of the blocks themselves, the max amount of inodes in the table, the very first position of the data block. All of this is stored in the super block. So some of it's stored in the boot record as well, but the super block also has some group specific information. And so, the super block. And then moving on to the group descriptor. This group descriptor is the second portion, and the reserved is the group descriptors is the third portion. And so, as we said, data blocks are associated to the groups, and these are just kind of descriptors used to reference these groups. And then moving on, you have the bitmaps. And so bitmaps are just a bit for bit it's a bit for bit map for where each bit stands for. First we have the block bitmap. So for that one, each bit references a block, and if it's allocated, it's set to 1. If it's unallocated, it's set to 0, etc. And then you have the inode bitmaps, and then the inode bitmaps, they track exactly which inodes are in use in the inode table, so that way whenever you need one, you can go grab one. And then, that's what the bitmaps are for, though, of course. And then the inode table is just a big old array, basically, that stores all the inodes. What is an inode? I've said that quite a bit. An inode is essentially just the file header. Every file header has a structure. It's called an inode that stores the file header, and so the inodes store metadata such as the timestamps, which is great value, and it also stores the location of the file. If you're going to have to carve out any data yourself, you're going to be looking at these inodes. And then inodes are stored in essentially a very large array, I said that already, and it's an inode table. In order to find the contents, you got to go to the directory entries. So you'll find the directory entries of a file, and you can the directory entries store essentially file names and their inode headers, so you can locate the files via their inode headers. So then the last section, of course, the data blocks, and this is where all the information is stored. I think it's worth noting that whenever you delete a file, the data blocks do not get wiped out. They're not allocated, but they can be overwritten, but the information may still be persistent in the data section, as well as whenever you wipe out a directory, as the second part right here, when files are deleted, the directory entries are simply marked as deleted and will be overwritten as time comes, as more entries get added. So right off the bat, right when it's deleted, it's still there, but however it's been zeroed out, but you can still locate where it is. And this gives us the ability to carve it out. And so every directory is a file, and every directory, just like the fat table, is just like it begins with a dot and a dot entry, and then for the dot's parent, dot's current. And then each directory entry is just a list of entries for their files, so file names versus their inode headers. And so there's 5 pieces of information stored in the entry. There's the inode header, there's the size of the entry, there's the length of the file, there's the file type, which if you're trying to figure out if this is a directory or a regular file or a socket, you will look at the file type. 0 is unknown, 1's regular file, 2 is a directory, and I believe there's about eight options. And then the last part, of course, is the file name. So to access the data block, you're going to have to go straight from the root directory, and you're going to locate your inode headers. You always got to go start at the root directory. So, for example, I'm going from home to Ryan to pictures to hat.jpg. You got to go into the root directory, look for the home directory, go for the home directory, and locate the inode headers for the directory named Ryan. You go to Ryan directory and locate the pictures directory, and go to the pictures directory, and then locate the inode headers for hat.jpg. And then you can finally look at the contents of hat.jpg because you found its inode headers. And so there's a lot of forensic artifacts, of course, of interest. Besides the actual data blocks and the information stored on it, there's a lot of metadata that's stored in the inodes. So inodes would be very valuable. You're going to need to know how to use or parse the file system if you have to carve it out. So you're going to need the boot sector and the super blocks are going to be essential. And then the journal is going to be of high value. And I'll get to that in just a second. And anything, of course, the journal is of high value, but anything user specific, such as stuff stored in the home or user directory or the root directory, these will be great artifacts to look at. You want to take a look at these. The journals themselves, the journals contain a lot of significant forensic value, and it can also be help us locate deleted data on the disk, because what the journal does is it tracks transactions while they're in the process of being committed. So as a transaction is, if a system fails, it can revert the transaction or continue on if it can't. But there's 3 different settings. It can be, if it's in journal mode, which is both metadata and the file contents themselves are written into the journal. So there, it literally writes both every time. And this is if it's set in the journal mode. This is the safest mode, and this provides the safest for safest prevention against system failures or loss of data due to system failures. And then, but there's 2 other settings that might not be helpful. They still store the metadata in the log, however it does not store the actual file contents in order and write back, which is unfortunate, but the user gets to set these settings, so that's what it is. These are some other evidence artifacts you'll probably find inside of Linux. Just ignore the Windows, but you can see there's like the activity logs and the bar log, the user profile and home/user. We'll have the operating system information, operating system install data, I'm not sure if that's needed, host name, computer name, IP address, DNS servers, leased out, obtained, okay, some bar log, and then time zone information, that's not, okay, well, user login history, and then recently accessed files, connected USB devices history, that should be of high value to look at. Some forensic tools to look at these are, of course, there's the one we talked about in class. There's FTK Imager, there's Ncase, and there's also a free one. It's called Autopsy. It's part of the sleuth kit. But if you want to also do some live forensics, which would be very common if you're working with this file system, to be honest, you'll do there'll be some volatility, and you can use it to extract information about you can use volatility to extract information about live running processes. There's many others besides volatility. But that's all I have for y'all today. If you have any comments for me, these are my references. Feel free to leave a comment and I will reply. Thank you. Have a nice day.